Systems as boss. Why systems cannot understand themselves. Any change requires new knowledge. New knowledge must necessarily exist outside the system. Last week, we established that performance belongs to systems, not individuals. But there's a crucial corollary to this understanding that most people miss. A system cannot understand itself. Like a ship adrift in fog, a system lacks the perspective necessary for self diagnosis and self correction. It requires guidance from outside its own boundaries. Knowledge and skill are required to supply this guidance. In our world today, there's an abundance of subject matter knowledge, but a dearth of knowledge and understanding about systems. Alas, both are required to make any lasting change or improvement. Why organizations struggle to get better. This is why organizations struggle to get better. The people working within the system are part of the system. They cannot step outside it to see it clearly. They experience the symptoms of their own dysfunction, the delays, the rework, the frustration, the inconsistent results, but they cannot perceive the underlying causes. They may blame individuals, point to external factors, or assume that trying harder will solve problems. But without a systems perspective, their efforts typically fail to address root causes. Consider a hospital emergency room that consistently has long wait times. The doctors and nurses within the system experience the problem acutely. They see frustrated patients, they feel rushed and stressed, they work longer hours to try to catch up, but they cannot see the systematic causes. Perhaps the bed management system doesn't communicate effectively with the admission process, or the diagnostic testing protocols create bottlenecks, or the staffing model doesn't account for predictable patterns in patient flow. These are systematic issues that require a systems perspective to diagnose and resolve. The same is true outside of industry as well. Sociologically, we cannot seem to move the needle to get better. Indeed, part of this is because there is no shared aim between sociological actors, but also this inability to improve stems from the inability to escape the systems we are bound by. How can we get better if we're still stuck in the same paradigmatic conversations about income and GDP, welfare, a division between what is properly public and properly private? Knowledge which leads to improvement must always come from outside of the current system. Don't expect a business executive to change a dysfunctional merit program that he himself has risen through the ranks from. Don't trust a doctor to improve upon the medical system. Don't trust a politician, well, ever. Beyond motivation and punishment. The traditional view of achievement focuses on human motivation, skill, and effort. How to inspire people to work harder, how to train individuals to perform at a certain level, how to reward good performance, how to address poor performance. This approach assumes that the primary constraint on performance, whether individual or organizational, is the effort or attitude or acumen of individuals. This assumption is wrong. Consider an experiment. There are two Tetris games on the computer. They are identical with one exception, the controls. In one game, the controls are intuitive. The left arrow moves the block left, the right arrow right. The up arrow rotates the block. In the second game, the mappings of the controls are scattered. The up arrow moves the block left, the down arrow moves it right, the left arrow rotates. Despite perfect knowledge of these controls, despite hours of practice, despite dexterity and smarts, and even a knowledge of good Tetris strategy, the player with the more difficult configuration will never surpass the performance of even a casual player of the first configuration. Performance is dictated far more by the system than by anything else. I've actually created this experiment for subscribers, which you could find on the Substack. But if performance is primarily a function of systems rather than individuals, then the entire approach to change and improvement must be fundamentally reconsidered. For business managers to sports coaches to political leaders and community organizers, the real work is not to extract effort, reward attitude, or punish poor morale. The real work is to design, improve, and configure systems and ecosystems in such a way that supports the human interactions, to make good performance easier and more likely for everyone. When systems support humans. When individuals are supported rather than encumbered by the systems meant to help them, morale takes care of itself. Enthusiasm grows naturally when people can succeed. When processes are coherent, when communication is clear, when tools function properly, when the work environment is well designed, people rise to the occasion without needing pep talks or threats. All this takes place whether or not they are enlightened to the role of systems in their lives. Consider the difference between two manufacturing plants producing identical products. In the first plant, workers struggle with outdated equipment, unclear procedures, poor communication between shifts, and inadequate training. In the second plant, workers have reliable equipment, clear procedures, effective communication systems, and comprehensive training. Which plant is in a better position to improve, to increase capacity, to meet tougher and tougher quality targets, to satisfy their customers, to survive into the next generation, to receive a larger investment? Which of the two will have less turnover and higher morale? Conversely, which plant will have managers worried about motivation? Despite their best efforts, they frequently miss quality targets and production deadlines. The difference between these two facilities is not the character, intelligence, or motivation of the workers. The difference is the quality of the systems in which they work. Performance is bounded by systems. A quagmire for traditional thinking. Once, a senior vice president of human resources told me her talent strategy. It was to attract and retain highly collaborative and intelligent human capital, and to reward them based on performance in areas of innovation, customer commitment, sales, performance, and so on and so forth. It did not occur to her that these two facets of her talent strategy were in irreconcilable opposition to one another. These two goals exist in an impossible tension. Goal 2 requires cooperation and systematic approaches. It focuses on creating conditions where everyone can succeed and fosters an environment where improvement emerges as a result of collaboration. Goal 1 rewards exceptionalism and an individual achievement. It seeks to elevate heroes among commoners, patricians among plebeians, gods among men. It puts people in conflict with one another. It creates incentives for people to forego the work of systematic improvement for personal gain and aggrandizement. The truth is, both goals cannot be pursued simultaneously. You can either reward superstars for their individual achievements, or you can build a system where everyone can succeed consistently. Trying to do both will yield neither. It will only lead to confusion, resentment, and suboptimal performance across the organization. If long-term performance is to be attained and elevated, it should be clear that the collaborative approach is the only option. The conflict-ridden approaches to performance based on ranking of individual performance has a short and limited lifespan. Cannibals do not sleep well at night. Leadership is systems design. From this perspective, anybody who wants to take on a leadership role, whether that be in their industry as a manager, in the sphere of public opinion as an activist, politician, or academic, or even in your personal life, as a person who simply wants to do more and achieve more, the task becomes clear. Change, improvement, personal betterment, performance stems from a discipline of system design and continual redesign. To improve, one must understand how things actually happen, what constraints exist, how they limit and bottleneck performance, and how those boundaries can be addressed or exploited. This is not to suggest that the individual can or ought to be ignored, or that individuals can be treated as interchangeable components. Quite the opposite. Understanding systems makes it possible to better serve individual needs by creating conditions in which people's strengths can contribute and their limitations are supported. This requires a different set of skills than what is traditionally peddled. Instead of skills focusing on personal acumen and motivation, it requires skills in observation, analysis, experimentation, and system design. Most importantly, it begins with a foundational understanding of how systems work and operate. Systems may be different and diverse, but once identified, they can be studied, dissected, understood. Through a devotion to systems understanding, greater performance will inevitably emerge.